I think any teleconference, you have to roll call.
Okay,
Yes.
go for it.
I defer to the clerk's office since they know how to run the meetings.
Kim? Kim? Nellie?
Hold on.
Kim's
Can you
talking.
hear me?
Now we can.
Yes,
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, Board Member Collins, how do you vote?
Yes.
Board Member DeBrienza,
yes,
Councilmember Koo,
Yes.
3 yes, Tanaka absent.
I'm here.
All
I
right.
just got admitted.
There he is.
he's here.
I was on the thing for 10 minutes and no one admitted me. So thank you for admitting me. Appreciate it.
Oh, sorry about that, Greg.
No problem. It's not you.
We just assigned you a bunch of work, so that'll teach you to wait in the waiting room.
I know.
Greg, we just started. There was no oral communications, and we approved the February 20 minutes. So you haven't missed much. All right, next item 3, superintendent and city managers comments. I see Dr. Austin is with us. You want to get us going?
I sure am. I'll go quick. I mean, as you would expect, people are missing school, and that includes the people who work in them. So it's very clear that the ability of schools to shift overnight into a system that in any way replicates what we were doing face-to-face in school just isn't possible, especially not in a short-term situation like what we had. Such, you know, one minute we're in school and that afternoon we're being canceled by the county, and even that point thinking that we'd be out 3 weeks plus a spring break, which seemed like a long time, and now to be told not coming back, you won't be coming back this summer, and then everybody under the sun's got a projection about what the fall will look like. So who knows when we get there. But you know, it's a national issue. Everyone's in the same boat to a large degree. In fact, I would say, well, there's not a sliding scale. We're better off than a lot of places that have resource issues, that have extreme poverty, that have other things in big numbers. So we're doing the best we can. Our teachers are working hard, learning on the fly also. We're starting to see some really nice examples of things that teachers are doing, not only professionally, but making personal contacts and really trying to acknowledge that the kids are missing their teachers and missing their friends. But we're working through it. We're going to start weekly live webinars starting Monday. It'll be every Monday. And the concept is to try to provide some context to things that are happening. So many things had to happen so quickly that it'd be easy to miss the context or miss the details. So we're going to go back and try to do some more of that. And it'll be a webinar format just like this that we'll also record and then post and be able to send out after the fact. The concept is it'll be an hour, 5:30 at night, every Monday. And, you know, the first one I'll probably carry, and after that, we'll bring in other people, you know, virtually to talk about specific aspects of school and see where that goes. So that's what I've got for today.
Dinner with the superintendent. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's right.
I heard it on there.
Todd, a question for the superintendent regarding the webinars. Oh, I'm sorry, not regarding the webinars, but just in general. Just wondering, do you have an assessment about the mental health of the students in the community?
Yeah, actually, this year we connected with a third party called Care Solace. It's on our website, and the nice thing about Care Solace is that we had it in place for several months already, and parents can go there. and kids can go there directly. It's like a one-stop shop. You can go there and get services immediately. It helps route you to the right places, even local doctors. And we can see from the report that I just received just days ago, an uptick in usage. So two things: glad that we have it and it's there, and also concerned about the uptick. And that's being reported as a national trend.
That's yeah, that's concerning. I just also want to let you know that on the city's website, we have a list of therapists here in Palo Alto that have also volunteered to contribute some of their time to take calls. And I'll send that information to the chair to forward to you should you want that.
That'd be great.
Also.
Thank you.
And as you're planning, for the fall, for the new school year, because like you said, we really have no idea how long this is going to go on, if you do come back in the fall, you're planning for the social distancing within the classrooms as well. Is that part? Because I'm listening to the governor, he gave out his points, a strategy on how to come back for businesses mostly, especially with such as the restaurants, right? And he's saying that it's not going to be the same, even though the restaurants might open, they're going to be kind of like patrons are going to be further apart from each other, so there's less people in the restaurant. So is that going to be some consideration for the schools as well, for the students?
Well, I was hoping he was just thinking out loud, like last time when he said he was talking to his daughter. He's saying a lot of things right now that with really no direction. I understand he's got opinions, and I respect his office of serving as the governor. But it's a little bit wild to be learning about what our plans are by having to watch the news. And the California Department of Education is not leading any of these discussions. That's really who I'd like to be hearing from right now. Some of the things that are pretty clear, though, is we need to start thinking more radically about what's possible and what might be, and not hold back our brainstorming through filters of what schools looked like 3 or 4 months ago. We need to think extreme and then go back off from that into something that's acceptable. But social distancing, your schools are a certain size, right? And some things just aren't practical. I saw guidelines on childcare even. So, you can do it groups of 10, I think is the last thing I saw, on 6 feet apart. It's like, really, just think about that. You're going to have a bunch of 6-year-olds 6 feet apart. I mean, I don't know, where the rubber hits the road is going to be the tough part. And then on top of that, and I'm working on this with our lobbyist, some of the things that they're talking about, like an increase in blended and distance learning, I'm a supporter of that because we'll have some time and we can get it better and get that right. But their own rules prohibit it. So we have a lot of work to do there with the lobbyists, and luckily we're well positioned to have our voice heard. So, but there's a lot of work ahead for everybody. I'm looking at Ed. Ed's job is the same right now. It's, you think you know your job, and then one day it's turned on its ear.
Thank you for that perspective, because it's not something that we hear. We're just hearing one side, so it's very nice to hear from you as well. And about the county calls, right, to that the public health officer has twice a week.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have somebody on that, and then I have superintendent's calls twice a week, and they come to ours also.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
It's
you.
very insightful to hear from you. Thank you.
I see Councilmember Tanaka has raised his hand. Why don't you go ahead, Greg?
Thank you. So Don, I'm a recipient of your videos. I actually like it. So thank you for doing it. I think probably a lot of parents appreciate that. And, you know, it's, even if, even after this ends, I think it's probably a good idea to continue it. So, uh, you know, one thing I wanted to ask you is, um, and I'm not an expert in education like you guys, so I'm trying to educate myself on this. But if you look at like public school, and then you look at like a lot of the private schools, when this happened, right? Um, I, it seemed like a lot of the private schools were able to, you know, begin doing some sort of online instruction, you know, fairly quickly. And I know for us, it's been a lot harder in the school district. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the uh, challenge differences between the public schools and private schools, and because I have like a list of a few questions that I'm not sure if you're on the parent groups. So I'm on these WeChat groups and our Facebook groups and
Yeah.
you know, Slack. There's a bunch of parents groups,
Yeah.
and there's like a group of I have a list of topics here from the different parents groups. But I'm not sure if you've been following this, but that's one of the big questions that people are asking. In fact, it may be great, you know, to answer it here, but also, you know, perhaps make a video about this, because I think a lot of people are always wondering, like, what the heck, like why is there such a difference between the two? And I don't know if you could speak a little bit about it.
Sure. So a couple things. The very first thing you said about, you know, even when this is over, we should continue some things. That's going to be true of a lot of parts of this, that I think we're going to learn some things that are just going to be like, wow, why didn't we do that before? Right. So I think we're going to come out of this in some places stronger, just exactly like you pointed out. Next, I'm not on all those groups. And I won't be. We're getting plenty of feedback. Here's our challenge. I think the biggest challenge that I've had personally on this one is, in the moment decision making is not going to follow typical processes, right? We've done some things that would have taken a year of discussions and committee works, and we've done them in an hour and a half because we had to. So that pace is uncomfortable for people, especially an engaged community like here, that wants to know all the whys and the hows and this and that. I had a great talk with one of my cabinet members last night about some study sessions that they're doing with parents to find out where their sticking points are right now. So we're doing really small groups so that we can get very detailed information. And one was their desire to know the whys behind some things, okay? And in my mind, I'm thinking that's all I do all day long. I make decisions, I explain the whys, but then he reminded me, yeah, but that's with other superintendents who are trying to make these decisions and you're helping them. And the parents aren't getting all of that. So we're going to start filling that in more. That's why we're going to do the webinars where people can submit stuff and we can respond and do some of that. And then there's this really challenging balance of when the information we're sending it out is overwhelming, it's too much. And then people say, well, we just want like a cheat sheet. Then you send the cheat sheet and it's like, well, that doesn't answer this level of question. And I mean, it's not unique to Palo Alto or to schools. It's just really, really challenging. And the same people that are working the problems are communicating it out too. So, you know, we'll spend 3/4 of a day solving problems or issues. And then the next quarter of the day and into the night is us trying to then write it up, communicate it, do videos, whatever it might be. And it's the same people doing all that work. So it's a challenge, man. So I'm just grateful that we've got a community that sees value in the schools and overwhelmingly trust the school system, even though there's some questions that we need to fill in some gaps on.
So basically, the reason why like private schools have been able to start online education fairly quickly after the shutdown versus public schools is because you're saying it's the decision-making process is a lot slower in the public system, is what you're saying.
So I'm going to add to that. Our state administrative group is called AXA, and the AXA director does weekly call-ins, and he just reminded everybody, private schools don't have collective bargaining.
Mm.
Okay, so last night, and our teachers union is good, and they're not the toughest I've ever worked with, but last night I literally spent hours going back and forth with the union president about expectations for teacher contact with students, how we're reaching decisions about what generates credit. At a private school, you don't do that. Private school, the headmaster or whatever the structure is says, here's what we're doing, and you do it.
Mm.
That's not the way it works in California, a collective bargaining state.
Mm.
So it is slower, and it's
Not to mention ed code.
in ed code, exactly. So there are a lot of things that they just don't have some of the restrictions.
I'm not even sure what EDCO is. What is EDCO?
California Education Code, which is this thick set of regulations that governs public schools.
I've never read it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I think because like there's like what I'll call raging debates in these forums and groups about this topic, right? About like, because some people have kids in private school and some in public school, and people like are doing a lot of comparisons, right? And some of the differences are pretty stark right now. Like I think Castalia, right, almost immediately a week after, or maybe less than a week, started doing online instructions, right? And so people are like, anyways, if you're not on some of these groups, I would definitely encourage either, maybe, I think probably the board members are on these groups, but it's definitely good to hear about it because you see the things that people are saying. I think the second big thing, and so this is probably not come as any surprise, is there's a lot of people who are concerned about grades, no grades, especially for people who are looking to go to college. I don't know if this may be another ed code thing, I'm not sure, but I think that this is another thing that people really are worried about, because some schools are still giving the option of having grades, and some schools like ours, it doesn't matter, you only pass fail. And so people worry about their GPA and how to look for college. Maybe some colleges like the UC systems will take that into account, but then there's other schools that like my niece and nephew, they go to school district where they actually have the option of doing grades or doing pass fail. And so a lot of parents are really, really concerned that that they're going to be at a disadvantage when their kids apply to college. Because some kids are going to have grades, some kids aren't going to have grades. How's it going to affect their GPA calculation? And people are thinking more than just UCs. Maybe they want to go Princeton or Harvard, or I don't know, right? And so how does that? So I think that's the other big kind of question that's going on these forums.
Yeah. Right. I understand that. I'm on a national panel at 4:00 today. It's going to be the largest in the history of the organization to talk specifically about grades, because our movement to credit, no credit is now sweeping the entire nation. It's going to be one of the biggest equity issues in the entire country. I saw this morning that San Francisco Unified is talking about giving all kids A's. Here's the reality. This semester is a total wash for grades. It's going to be irrelevant. But what we could say with certainty is that the disparity between teachers and school districts and ability to serve special needs students and English language learners, which was already an issue, didn't get better when we went to distance learning. So the kids that were going to be punished the worst with a grading system are the kids who need us the most, and that's not okay. So I understand everyone's got their thoughts. We did a couple things. First of all, we didn't do it in isolation. So we called the experts in the entire nation on this topic. We called the top colleges and universities across the board. They didn't necessarily make recommendations, but said what we did was totally acceptable. In fact, the UC and Cal States changed their requirements largely because of our action. So what the parents and everybody can't know is every interaction that we have. But you know, we're virtually in the room with the people making all these decisions. Everyone's fine. Now, as far as other districts, I think it's probably going to break out in a couple places. I think people are either going to have our system exactly, like literally people are cutting and pasting our approach, or they'll have something where you can choose a grade, but the choice of a grade in itself is about as inequitable as you can get. The students who are already struggling are going to have the biggest hole to crawl out of, and the ones that were already in advantageous places will just check out with that grade that they had. So there's no perfect answer. Sequoia went with us last night. Santa Clara, Mountain View, Los Altos, San Jose, Berkeley. I mean, when we went first, I understand the anxiety. I get it, but we're by no means alone anymore.
I think most parents probably don't think about the equity, but they're thinking about it as their own kids.
Sure.
And they're thinking about like, because I think a lot of the parents here in our city have very high expectation of their kids, like they're going to go to Harvard or Princeton or Stanford or something like that, right? To these really very elite colleges, and I think I think a lot of parents, they are very concerned about how. I mean, I think you're talking about the equity issue of education of kids within the Palo Alto school districts. I think what the equity issue that most parents I think are thinking of are equity issues the other way, which is when their kids apply to one of these elite colleges and they're applying against a kid who has had grades and has had, the full online lectures and all the other stuff, how will a Palo Alto Unified School District kid fare against a kid where things were a little bit more, let's say normal, right? Versus doing shutdown mode, and that's I think in terms of equity, that's the equity issue that I think probably a lot of parents are thinking of right now. And I mean, I actually did, like, so the first issue is this issue that I know people are very passionate about, and I think that's something that which I think people have a lot of questions about. The second big thing is the grades, no grades, especially for parents of kids that want to go to college or want to go to an elite college, right? So that's the other really big concern that I've seen that people are really, really up in arms about. And so anyways, so I think if all the top colleges say, well, we're going to totally ignore grades, that's one thing, right? But if it's just a UC system, I think that's not very satisfying to a lot of parents, I think. So that's something to think about. I'm not sure if you've already, or if maybe you've already determined all of the top universities in the world are going to totally ignore the grades, then that's another story. But it doesn't seem like that's the case.
It's
wait, I want to move us along because while these are interesting topics, I think they kind of go outside the scope of the liaison.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to relay some of the stuff from the parents group.
No, I appreciate you raising the issue.
You guys probably know this already, but it's something which I think is simmering right in the community.
Yeah.
But you guys probably know that already. So
I can check my inbox. Yeah, I do see those things. Other comments for Dr. Austin before we move on to City Manager Shikata? Okay, Ed, why don't you go ahead?
All right, my apologies for being late for the meeting this morning. We were tied up with our department heads talking about some related issues, so we have to maybe draw a connection there. Perhaps just hopefully.
Are you going to be grading them no credit, Ed, this year?
We get no credit. I'm sorry, just period across the board. Well, although actually we have been getting some nice feedback on our communications, which has been a bright spot given all of the rapidly changing news in our region, certainly beyond that. And so we've been particularly focused on making sure we can communicate to the Palo Alto community what's happening that affects our residents and businesses. We've been doing weekly updates with the City Council. It's a standing item now for the City Council to get a COVID update, and much of our efforts over the last several weeks have been on really ensuring we continue to provide our essential public safety services, and that in particular positioning our first responders to ensure that their needs, both in terms of PPE as well as in some contingency planning for what they encounter on calls, and our ability to ensure that their protocols are appropriately modified in order to walk into situations with the best information, as well as when and if exposures or suspected exposures happen, that we've got clear systems for ensuring their safety as well as that of the community. So that's been a key focus for us. Moving to a completely teleworked workforce has also been the other, I'll say, certainly consuming activity. It's challenging, but I will say that I think our organization has performed really well in moving much of the ongoing business of the city to a completely remote operation. So not unlike perhaps distance learning, distance working for a city is an entirely new model for us, for sure. And I think most public agencies find themselves in the same space. But I've been amazed at how quickly we've been able to adapt and move much of what the ongoing business of the city is into this new environment. A couple of things just to note along those lines, really adapting things such as community services, so recreation programs, to virtual mode. I'm sure all of us have had our own slice of that, but we've been increasingly focused on that. Much of the first few weeks was just the transition, but now that we're in the transition, to focus on the content and the services themselves, both what can be provided today, but also perhaps more importantly, how we're planning for what we'll call a recovery. And that doesn't seem like an adequate term, because we know that the future, when we're able to move around more than sheltering in place, will be different from what it was just a month or more ago. So preparing for that and how we can adapt our programming accordingly, both in the recreation space as well as the more administrative services. But would like to note on the library front, one of the areas just of, I think, worth noting, a couple of things. One is much of our library activities, library staff activities, moved when we ultimately needed to close the library branches to refocusing on the service and the skill set that our library staff brought to standing up our call center that was dealing with ongoing questions from the community, many of which went to 911 in the absence of having somewhere else to pose questions about COVID or where they can get tested or what have you. So library and community services staff made a very quick transition into getting that new door open for Palo Alto community members to stay in touch and have ongoing feedback as well with the city. And on the library front, we moved much of our programming to virtual program, although that was already existing, and have now certainly a pretty robust set of offerings available online, including, note that all Palo Alto residents and students at Palo Unified have library cards, this joint card access to the library. And also, just as was talked about earlier, in terms of the parents' perspective and really this new world of homeschooling, we've seen it as an employer and the impact that has on our staff's ability to even get a moment to do their job, the day job, while the parent job and the homeschooling assistant job is in place, and it's a real challenge. So one of the tools we've just put into place is a partnership with care.com, which is really just kind of a matchmaking service between parents or any one looking for care with care providers, typically sole, maybe babysitters or something along those lines, or to organize operations. But that we're just getting that launched, and may provide an additional avenue as we're looking both for our own staff as well as other essential workers as we're making the transition either to recovery or even in the current circumstance for those who need it. So let me stop there. And well, actually, the one thing I didn't mention that I should mention, budget. And so we are definitely confronting the fiscal challenges that are anticipated. The city relies, and we've been fortunate to have ongoing resources through hotel taxes and sales taxes traditionally in Palo Alto. Obviously, those are all really low at this point, and they've seen dramatic reductions and traumatic reductions. And so as such, we're needing to re-gear our financial planning to that reality and the anticipation that it won't recover quickly as well. And so next week will be the first discussion at the City Council, receiving a transmittal of the city manager's proposed budget. And it's really a couple of pieces. One is aligning revenues and expenditures to what we knew prior to COVID. And now with COVID, just really the beginning of a conversation that will last through May and June of what are the actions we need to take in order to realign, starting with our expectations of the services provided by the city, and then ultimately to the nitty-gritty of costs and revenues and how those would reflect a dramatic reduction in our expected revenues over the next year, which will be the focus for this budget discussion. While we do expect it'll take more than a year for us to potentially recover. So let me stop there and turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. That's I know a lot's going on, and you guys have, from my perspective, done a terrific job at both kind of pivoting your model and communicating with the community about what you're doing. So I really appreciate it. I did have a question. A lot of the things that we were tracking carefully before, including grade crossing, North Ventura, revenue measures that you guys were anticipating for the ballot. Are any of those things, our own relationship with you guys on Cubberley and negotiation of the Cubberley lease? Can you just comment on kind of the state of play of those?
Sure. I think it's an overall theme that the term I've begun to use way too often is baby steps. So we've moved in from, we were going full speed ahead to now we've really needed to move more along baby steps in recognizing that just even our ability to maintain communications has been really required to be reset altogether. So, certainly having meetings like this, it was pretty remarkable for us to have a council meeting to start, and then now we've gotten our stride, and I think that we've now got a pretty good system there. And so we're doing the same in different venues for different purposes. So starting at that top line, one of the early actions taken by the council was to put the brakes on the sales tax work. And so at this point, the sales tax is off, not pursuing that as a part, or sales tax, I'm sorry, the business tax as a part of the November ballot. So that's been scrapped altogether. And as a consequence, or as a other side of the coin, at least related, is the great separation financing that would presumably be part of that business tax. Meanwhile, we've had a lot of technical work to do on the grade separation. So that work has proceeded with our consultant, and we're now just taking the baby steps with our expanded community advisory panel to get them back in conversation. So some of the same dynamics of what it takes to run a council meeting are playing themselves out with what it takes to run an XCAP meeting. So the ability for the chair and the members to participate much less than the content of what they'll discuss. And so we've got a lot of work now to share with them, technical work that's been done. But then they're, over the course of the next week, I think going to have their next meeting, and then be able to talk about how they see their ability to pace the assignment that they had received from the council, how to put that in the context of both the revenue plan being, scrapped as far as the local revenue, but still now what's happening with the other major revenue source for grade separations, which is the VTA or the Santa Clara County Measure B funds for grade separations, and lots of dynamics at play there, some suggesting slow down, some suggesting speed up in order to just ensure that we're pursuing Palo Alto's interests. And then just the last note on the grade separations, meanwhile, Caltrain is going full speed ahead with their electrification project. So if you haven't noticed, the poles are up. The electrification poles are now up in Palo Alto. So that work is continuing, and they're actually doing is Churchill closed today? It might be, and it will be soon for the purpose of the construction that's happening right at the intersection. So lots of activity going there. Back on the question, perhaps on issues of, well, the one that we've been talking about in Coverly lease, we've had to also do some baby steps with our teams, with Dr. Austin and myself, that have been working out some of the details on the lease extension. I think we're very close with that, but I did share with Dr. Austin at our last meeting that we need to talk in terms of the revenues that have been are part of the lease and that are again going to be part of our budget discussion going forward. So I don't want to presuppose what the outcome of that is, but it's going to be a topic of conversation both at the council and as a consequence that we need to discuss further. And I'm sorry, with that long-winded answer, anything I missed that you want to touch on?
No, that was great. Thank you for the candor. I mean, it's a difficult time, right? So I think we're all expecting the unexpected. You didn't mention North Ventura. Is that on hold?
We've had a community meeting as recently, but I think the same theme of baby steps comes into play in that, our ability to maintain effective community engagement is entirely different now. And so while we've continued some of that work, I think we need to take a step back and look at how far can we get in the current environment, and what's our expectation of what and how the environment will change as we come out. So there's been some work, but I wouldn't call it anything that is a significant milestone.
Thank you. Other questions for city manager? All right, then that's item 3. Let's move on to item 4, recent city council and school district board meetings. City, you're up first. Councilmember Koo, Councilmember Tanaka. I want to give a quick recap.
Our meetings have mostly been with the COVID-19 update since the city had declared its emergency declaration. Even prior to that, we have a Palo Alto Stanford Citizen Core Council that upon the declaration, the emergency office center was opened, and so it's been staffed, and we are getting twice a week updates with the different sectors in the city. So everybody kind of gives their conditions and what their plans are. And I think with the school district, we have Mike Jacobs, your safety officer, who also partakes in this meeting and gives us his updates. But mostly it's, the hospitals, Stanford and PAMS, are both kind of preparing all their abilities and capacity in order to ensure that when the surge of the cases happens and there's admittance into the hospital, that they are ready for that. So they've been procuring all of their protective gear as well as ventilators and ensuring that the testing is available. So we've been updated on that and we keep track of it. In other matters, there's a lot to do with ensuring that we have the shelter in place, making sure that our people who are out using our parks and open space are adhering to the county orders of social distancing or physical distancing. And Ed, if you have more to add on that, please chime in. Monique as well.
Yes, I would just add that as you're probably aware that enforcement of the social distancing requirements is the responsibility of local law enforcement. So our police, through our non-emergency line, have been responding to lots of calls, and largely, I think the largest one is gardening. And so it illicit gardening at this point has become the primary issue of concern. And so, you know, it's, police following up, but interesting, and not unlike our old leaf blower debates that used to dominate our public dialogue, we are also educating the property owner, not just the gardener themselves, as to the limitations under the shelter-in-place ordinance.
We also hear from your safety officer that, you know, there are some gathering at the schools. There is some vandalism at the schools. And so, you know, they're working, our safety officers, our police department is working pretty closely with the schools in order to ensure, you know, this matter is looked into and that they're enforcing it. So there is a close relationship there, and thank both sides to keep matters at bay.
There we go. Thanks for mentioning that. I did want to just mention, because I'm not sure everybody knows, all of our campuses are completely closed, including all our playing fields and tennis courts and so on. We have them, for the most part, I mean, where there are gates, the gates are locked. Where there are not gates, caution tape's gone up to try to keep people out, though the caution tape seems to come down at some places from time to time. So yeah, I didn't realize that law enforcement was working with us on that. I think that's very much needed, because I do see people, and you know, if the school looks open, people will go congregate there. I was over at Duveneck School. I was texting the superintendent last week. I rode my bike by there. I go by some schools every day to just see make sure there's no vandalism or whatever. And there were, you know, probably 10 people on the campus. You know, and they were in their little family groups doing whatever they were doing, but the fact was they shouldn't be there because the campus was closed. So it's, I think it requires constant effort to kind of maintain the integrity of those campuses. And so any help we can get from the city, I think, would be much appreciated.
And obviously there's also reports now that, you know, because the streets are less crowded, there's speeding going on. There's cars that are just not adhering to the traffic laws, you know, such as stop signs and so forth, even red lights. So the police officers are all kind of patrolling more. We had gone through an education phase, but now there's going to be more enforcement that is going to come forward.
Okay. On the school side, a couple of items. We did pass an emergency resolution probably 3 weeks ago now that gave substantial power to the superintendent to take action to address COVID-19 issues, which has made it so that we can move more quickly during the crisis, and particularly to serve students and as well as to protect the district's facilities and assets. We canceled our parcel tax election, which was a mail-in only election scheduled for May 5th. So we were able to have that canceled before the ballots went out. We now have to decide what we're going to do about parcel tax, because our parcel tax doesn't end this year. It ends in June of next year. But if we do not get it renewed sometime this year, we will have to plan a budget next year that includes not having the parcel tax, since it'll be uncertain whether it will be renewed or not. And that creates a lot of, as you guys can imagine, if you had a $15 million hole in your budget, well, wait, you do have a $15 million hole in your budget. That creates a lot of disruption and organizational angst that that potentially we can avoid if we can have an election in a timely way. So that's a big issue for us to work on. Obviously, as we were talking about, we've rolled out a full distance learning plan. There's a 3-phase plan. We're now in phase 3, which is the long-term plan. Dr. Austin talked about that earlier. Coming up, we've got significant budget work to do. Our budget situation is somewhat different from the cities in that our major sources of revenue are property tax, which is not as sensitive to immediate economic conditions as things like sales tax and hotel tax. So our revenue, at least for the time being, is stable, but we anticipate significant reduction. Well, 2 things. One is we have additional expenses this year that were unbudgeted expenses that we're going to have to figure out how we're going to handle. And then 2 is we've got anticipating reductions next year, both from non-local funding like state and federal sources, as well as potential reduction in property tax revenue, which is our major form of revenue. So, and then on top of that, we've got uncertainty around our parcel tax, which is about $16 million of our $260 million budget. So altogether, a lot of moving parts, many more than we're used to. And I think the board's major focus for the rest of this year will be figuring out how to put those pieces together in a way that that works best for our organization and supports our kids. So that'll be a big lift. The other is, as Dr. Austin alluded, we've got decisions to make, some coming up almost immediately, in terms of what are we going to do for the summer, if anything, and what are we going to do for the fall. Summer school is a wide open topic. There's a lot of learning loss that's going on in our district and every district in the state, most districts in the country. And summer's a time to make up some of that learning loss, but it seems certain that we're not going to have in-person school. So the question is whether we do a remote learning program for the summer. If we do, what does that look like? Who's eligible? How is it provided? What's the content of it? So those are all questions that Dr. Austin and his team are working hard on. We've got the same issue with the fall, where hopefully we'll be able to bring back students and teachers to our facilities. And now the question is, do we try to add time to make up for some of the time that was lost? Under what conditions? As Councilmember Koo was mentioning, it's not clear kind of what conditions we'll be able to operate under in terms of density of students. Will we be able to have 25 students in a classroom? I mean, that's sort of the fundamental operating premise that drives all our economics and the way our schools work. If that's off the table, then things are going to have to look pretty different. So we've got a lot of, we've kind of scrambled the jets and I think gotten ourselves to a position where we are. We've got a lot more work ahead of us, both in terms of budget and operations to figure out, and a lot of it through the now and the end of our school year in June 30th. Mr. Brianza, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think you covered everything that was on my list. Not surprising. Budget is certainly the top of mind thing. And when Dr. Austin talked extensively about it at the beginning, but I think, we're as a board and on the social media sites that Mr. Tanaka was talking about, we're certainly getting a lot of feedback. And I'm really just referring to it as crisis learning. It's just what it is. There are families that write to us and say, please make it more rigorous, and families that write to us and say, please back off. There are families that say, please make it mandatory, and there are families that say, please make it optional. People say, please make it synchronous, and other people say, please don't make it synchronous. Our schedule's, wonky. The needs are very different and varied. There are a lot of families that are still just trying to get find a way to get to the lunches that we're offering. And so we're starting as a district to, you could fill out a form if you're choosing to have a lunch delivered to you if you can't get to the lunches. And we're finding either district staff or volunteers to get those lunches to people. And then there's school supplies, right? We started this phase 3 and some people don't have working pens and blank paper at home. So how do we get those supplies to kids? And that's even before you start this stuff that Mr. Tanaka was talking about, right? So, and then you get into this, okay, so what does that look like? And some kids are motivated independent learners and some kids need a very structured schedule, but please don't tell us exactly what the schedule has to be because we want to make our own. So it's really crisis learning across the board. And this balance between just calling it off altogether because there's just no way you can meet all the needs and trying to do what we can without, as Dr. Austin said, exacerbating the achievement gap and making it even worse than it already is at start. So it's certainly a challenge, but I appreciate all that staff is working on and appreciate the community letting us know their own personal experience and asking them to keep in mind that the experience is very different in other houses. So Dr. Austin had mentioned that there are sort of small focus groups trying to get that feedback and see how we can make tweaks, letting the teachers know that, hey, just because you told your students that you were going to do a Zoom at a certain time, if you didn't put it in the Schoology calendar, kids don't necessarily know that, or it's not all in the same place. So little tweaks we can make along the way to make it more efficient and more aligned and just easier for kids to navigate a very, very different experience. That's it, though.
I just have a question with regards to, since we're mostly doing all distance learning and a lot of it has to be online, I'm trying to remember, did we procure some laptops or some devices for the students, Ed?
Dr. Austin might even have numbers on that. There's thousands of devices I think we've handed out at this point.
To some of the students.
City side, I don't think we did.
We didn't, right? Okay.
We're about 2,500 devices right now. That number is still growing. So we have enough devices for any student who needs them, and we've got a lot of them out there right now.
And how do they apply for the devices?
Well, first of all, we sent them home with every kid that we knew was going to need one on the Friday of the closure. So even though that was super short notice, we just sent them out the door with one. Then we also allowed them to come in on the Monday of the closure, the very first day of the closure. We did, oh gosh, over 1,000 devices that day.
Wow.
And then since then, family engagement specialists have identified additional families in need. We did another 250 just a week or so ago. And some of those were delivered, some of those were drive up.
Thank you.
And it's for all of these things, lunches and devices and everything else, it's not just the families that we have always known are low income or maybe in need of more resources. As soon as layoffs started, the calculus changed on that, right? Families that aren't traditionally food insecure were suddenly food insecure.
Yeah.
Our family is not financially insecure, but we did not have a device for every person, right? My third grader just uses my laptop on the rare case that he needs it, but he's on a Zoom right now and so am I. So families that don't traditionally aren't ones that are on our radar as needing extra support, suddenly we're in a position where they needed extra support.
Yeah, that's a great point. I will add my own personal story, which is my son, who is who's severely autistic and goes to what's called a non-public school, needed a device to access his non-public school, and PAUSD is responsible for providing that device, and they did a great job, provided a great device, and we got it off to him in his group home, and he uses it to access school. So lots of people who didn't need devices before now need devices, and that's why, and the need keeps coming up. I think both Mr. Brienza and Dr. Austin mentioned, and this is a recurring thing. And I think just about every week we're having handout sessions at some school where people can make an appointment and come by and pick up devices, and our IT staff goes out there and has them all ready to go, and it's all contactless. I think handing out devices is something that we're doing a really good job of. I think the big challenge for us is what to do once people have the devices. I see Mr. Tanaka has his hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, I think you caught on me. I think, yeah, actually, I saw like New York Times today, something like 22 million people filed for unemployment over the past few weeks. And do you guys have a sense among the parents, like how many of them have been impacted by the economic meltdown that we've been experiencing? Is it just a fairly small number, or is it you see quite a few parents being hit by this?
I don't think we have. I mean, Dr. Austin may have a view. I don't think we really have a sense.
Okay. I'm just
no
curious.
More, yeah, no more so than anybody else.
I think that the PTAs are more closely connected, and probably, I mean, I think it's information we're collecting, right? Principals are in touch with families suddenly that are in a different situation. PTAs know the families on the ground. Our FESs, our family engagement specialists, are reaching out to families, but they know of the families we already know of, right? So how that's grown depends on if families are communicating that need to us, or if they're reaching out to us in some other way for lunches or devices or whatnot.
Well, I was just thinking about like because no one's going to put on the Facebook, oh, this, or they might, but I think one way you might be able to tell is like, are more families coming in for like the meals, right? Or are more people, I mean, in your case, it was a different situation, but maybe some families need a computer now, right? Or because maybe, maybe they were using the company's laptop, right? For the kids were using the company's laptop, but now, the parents laid off, right? So now they have to get another laptop, right? So I was wondering, like what kind of growth there's been in either food, like the meals, or like laptops. That might be a kind of a tell as to how the community is doing during these difficult times. Do you guys know like what the increase has been?
I don't know. Dr. Austin, I don't know if you have anything to contribute on that.
It's been in the ballpark of 600 meals a day, and it's been pretty consistent, with one exception right before spring break with a peak. There's probably a lot of different reasons for that. Every family is receiving a mailer this week to reiterate that they can contact us. We give one place where they can contact us for any of their needs, and we'll route it from there to make it really simple. So we'll have another sense this week.
Okay, so the meals are roughly level, and the laptops, I guess, is going up, or is it roughly level as well?
Yeah, the laptops have pretty much stabilized. This last week we did, I don't know, another 125, something like that, and we think we're about covered now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Let the record reflect that Councilmember Koo had to drop off. So now we have the three of us. We still have a quorum, however. Okay, so the next item is COVID-19 coordination update, and maybe
Chair Collins, did we want to check in with members of the public to see if they have any public comment on this item? We do have one attendee, so we might want to check in and see if there's any public comment. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
if anybody wants to make public comment, they can either raise their hand on the Zoom app, or if you're dialed in, you can press *9 on your phone. If you do that, the city clerk will, I'll recognize you for public comment. The clerk will unmute your microphone and you'll be able to comment. Okay, seeing no hands. So COVID-19 coordination update. I know we've covered a lot of this ground. Is there any additional ground we want to cover, Dr. Austin or Mr. Shikata?
I would just say, as always, it's great working with the city and Mr. Shikata. It's been great. We
call each other every once in a while just to check in, see if there's anything that either one of us should be sharing. But otherwise, it's been a really good relationship, as it has been. So nothing.
I'd just like
special.
to echo that and certainly appreciate the very close ongoing working relationship we have. I think our communication lines are open and certainly available whenever it's necessary. And every once in a while, something does flare up, and it's excellent that we're able to maintain close communication and coordination.
Okay. Any other comments on COVID-19 coordination?
Well, I'm just curious, because
Okay.
I think it's, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm not as tuned into the school district as some of you guys probably are, but you know, I'm just also curious from the school district perspective, what you know, from the city, what can the city do to help? I'm sure you and Ed probably already talking already, but I'm just curious to see if there's anything that would help the school district navigate these times, and what we could do as a good partner to really make sure that you guys are successful.
Dr. Austin, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take it. I think it's more horizon stuff. So immediately, probably very little. The rules and things are changing so quickly that's one of the things that Mr. Shikata and I talk about occasionally is, you know, we'll see something on the news and, hey, a rule just changed. You know, how does that impact us? Childcare is going to be an interesting one. So that's one we both have our eyes on, and we'll probably have to touch at some point, either together or to at least know what the other one's doing, or if we're doing it together. You know, I don't know yet. I think that's probably one coming down the road. And we've talked a little bit about food distribution and the role of the school district versus the different organizations that work in that space. But that's about it right this minute.
And I know Councilmember Koo raised earlier the Citizens Core Council that you have Mike Jacobs representing PAUSD. That is a helpful venue for us to be able to just flag issues that may be percolating among the various institutions in the Palo Alto community. So I think that's also a way for us to just stay in touch. And in many cases, it's to reality check what we've heard may be an issue. So take childcare on the early days of the emergency was seen as something we really need to get a hold of. You know, ultimately, the organizations that have the essential workers, certainly the healthcare organizations, were able to figure out their own needs and be able to take care of it to the extent that they needed to, as well as recognizing actually kind of the family dynamic that finds alternatives to putting their kids in a group setting. So using that as an example, I think this CCC is a good way for us to stay in touch, not only between the district and the city, but also with the other community partners that we all need to stay connected to going forward.
Jennifer, were you trying to get in? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as the parent of a high schooler, it would be great if the city continues, and it sounds like you're doing it, but trying to break up social gatherings, because I think that we really finally got kids to stay home. And now lately I'm hearing my kid and other parents talk about how their kids are saying that kids are starting to get together again. The narrative is that we've really flattened the curve and that we're over the worst part, and kids are starting to gather. And, you know, the last thing we need to do is lock ourselves in longer than we need to be, because you know, they keep connecting each other. So obviously more education, but if they can, you know, if you guys hear of gatherings, if you can continue to make sure they know it's just not okay yet.
Definitely. It's definitely on our radar screen. And again, the police department is keeping tabs on the calls as they come in. I would note that I think we've certainly seen, as we're now 30 days into the anniversary, 1 month anniversary of the shelter in place order, that the community is getting antsy. We're all getting antsy, and I think there's a recognition of that. That as this proceeds, we will need to find some ways to release some of that pressure. Not exactly sure what that is, but I think recognizing it is the first step that we need to take in order to have some means through which to address it. But thank you for raising it.
Great, thank you. Okay, the last thing we have on our agenda is updates on ongoing matters, and we've kind of talked about grade separation. We also talked somewhat about Coverly. I guess the one question, as long as I have Don and Ed on the call, is there was from the start we were going to have a joint, I forget what we called it, task force committee, and I'm wondering if we're still planning on moving ahead with that.
I think even when things were normal, we wanted to finish the lease agreement first and then go from there. I think especially since we've talked publicly about, maybe exploring some kind of a swap for Old Ventura Elementary School for some additional space over at Coverly, that will probably now maybe even factor into that subgroup. But I'm with Ed. I think, gosh, I wish we would have finished the lease 3 months ago. A whole bunch of reasons. We're close, but I think we're going to have some pretty significant sticking points that's going to take some work. But once that's done, I think our idea is that the committee goes in like we had planned.
Agreed.
Okay, so that's on hold then until then I just want to give an update to our body so that everybody knows kind of what the status of it is. So it sounds like that's on hold until the lease is completed, and we're kind of in the as Ed put it, the baby step phase of kind of pushing toward lease completion, with a lot of uncertainty thrown in because of economic conditions and so.
I'd say certainly the economics are a factor. On the form of the agreement itself, I think we're close. And you may recall that part of the legacy lease that we have is the childcare component, and so we're working on splitting that out. And so I owe Don a draft of what that piece of it looks like, and then we can put the two pieces together. So again, on the form, I think we're close, and then as it relates to one, the economics, and two, how the Ventura School might factor into that. I think we should proceed with that discussion, and we'll be able to report back.
Sounds good. I think that covers updates on ongoing matters. Future meetings and agendas. Does anybody have anything they want to put on that? I figure we'll be, the next meeting will probably look a lot like this one in terms of, as Ed put it, baby steps toward figuring out what's going on both sides of our agencies, and, kind of understanding whatever the new normal is a month from now. Anything people?
With one notable difference, that Chantal Cotton-Gaines will not be with us at our next meeting, as she will be on maternity leave.
Yay. Thanks, Ed. So Monique will be the main point of contact with you guys and working with the clerk's office, but I will be back. Just taking a little time.
Great.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Good luck with that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so hearing nothing further, I think that's our agenda, and we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
You guys.